The next morning Mark rose, dreading the task before him. He knew he needed to do it, so he might as well get it done. He asked Susan if she had a minute when she came by the hole he was digging with some of the men from the outside the neighborhood. The two of them walked out of earshot of the other men, but not so far that they weren't in plain sight. Mark was surprised that the talk went so well. Susan agreed with everything he told her. He couldn't help noticing the doe-eyed look she gave him as he spoke. He hoped she couldn't tell he'd noticed. He hoped even more that she was really listening to him. Later that day, he saw Jim. Mark asked his friend if he'd seen any difference in Susan. "Yeah," Jim answered, "I sure have. Did you tell her I talked to you?" "No, of course not." "I guess she figured it out then. She's so mad at me she won't even look at me. But at least she's not yelling at everybody, so I guess that's an improvement. We'll just have to see how long it lasts." Mark thought she'd get over it in a few days. He'd watch and see. If it looked like things were getting out of hand again, he'd step in quicker this time. He was finding it better to face problems head-on than to let them seethe. Plus, he couldn't afford to let her rile the men up so much that they didn't work. Meanwhile, the preparations were going fairly well. The digging crew finished all the foxholes by lunchtime on Wednesday. The brush crews were making good progress and estimated they'd be done by Friday. The foxhole crew moved on to the vehicle ditches. They split into two teams, one for each side, and started at the front of the subdivision. George and Alex had mowed down the grass and then plowed as deep as they could with the tractor to make the work easier. When all of the plowed dirt had been scooped out of the section they were working on, they brought out the big tiller to help break up the deeper dirt. Although using the tiller made the digging a little easier, it didn't really speed the process up any. In addition to digging out the ditches, something had to be done with the dirt. Someone suggested they pile it up against the side of any houses that might be susceptible to gunfire if there was a big attack. They only had two effective ways to move it. The easy way was to pile it up on Chaparro's trailer, pull the trailer where they wanted, and shovel the dirt off. Unfortunately, the trailer reached its weight limit long before it was full, volume-wise. The other was by wheelbarrow, which was slow and tedious. They tried using the pickups to haul the dirt, but the beds were too high to shovel the dirt into easily. George voiced his wish for a front-end loader for the tractor to Mark. However, no one they talked to knew of one. The first half day of work on the ditch provided less than 100 yards of progress on each side. With over 1,200 yards to go, it would take another 6 days or more to finish the digging at the current rate. The big problem was that as they moved back, the dirt would have to be carried further and further to get it where it was needed. Mark hoped if an attack came before they were done, the attackers wouldn't have vehicles. Yeah, right. That evening, they held a security committee meeting. Everyone who'd been at the meeting on Sunday was invited, and they all came, except Kurt. They reviewed the progress of the projects. Mark noticed that Susan was still treating Jim coolly, but she spoke with him if it had to do with the work. Mark didn't expect her to be friends with Jim. As long as they could work together, he was happy. Billy gave a report about the scouting. They were basically following the same route Mark and his team had followed a week ago. The big difference was that on horseback they could do in one day what had taken Mark's team 2 days on foot. Each day they were making the widening circles around Silver Hills, and so far they hadn't seen anyone or anything suspicious. Before the meeting was adjourned, Gunny asked if anyone had anything else. "I do," Rob said. "I noticed that the vehicle ditches are only 10 yards from the fences. Aren't you worried attackers may be able to use them for cover and concealment?" "That's a good question, Rob. I was thinking about that too. To answer your question, yes, they might be able to use them, but the guards in the tower should be able to see them. We probably ought to add some more towers just to be sure, but I think the protection that ditches give us from a vehicle attack far outweighs the small advantage they may provide to any MZBs," Gunny said almost eloquently. By midday Friday, the brush cutting was done, and Ted's crew started helping with the ditches. They started on the back on one side and worked toward the front. Their crew wasn't as large as the other two, and they had to move the dirt further, so they didn't make a lot of progress. However, every little bit helped. Mark made a point to tell each person how much everyone appreciated his or her work. The weather was unseasonably hot by the end of the week, and it also had become more humid each day. Between the hard work, the hot weather, and the stress of an impending attack, Everyone was tired, sore, and cranky. Mark thought they should take Sunday off even though they wouldn't be finished. He talked to everybody about it at the meeting on Friday night, and they all agreed that a day off would be a good thing. One thing he hadn't said was that maybe there would be no attack, since the week was almost over. With each moment that passed, he felt more and more like they had dodged a bullet. Not that they shouldn't finish what they had started. At some point, he was sure the defenses would be needed, but thankfully, perhaps not for a while. He suspected some of the others were feeling the same, but it seemed as if no one wanted to verbalize their hopes, just in case doing so might jinx their good fortune.